Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are on page 29 of our student journals. And before we get started, we're going to do our problem of the day. So today we're just going to refresh our minds about dividing with decimals. So our first problem is 24 and 4/10 divided by 4. Okay, so what we need to remember about dividing with decimals is we have our divisor and our dividend. Our dividend goes inside and our divisor goes outside. When it's set up like this though, I kind of remember, I use that in and out strategy again, and remember the first one goes in and the second one goes out, because sometimes with decimals it's a little trickier to remember which one's going in and out. So my 4 goes out, which is my divisor. My 24 and 4/10 goes in, which is my dividend. Now, when you set up your division problem, you need to make sure your divisor does not have a decimal. So my divisor does not have a decimal, so I am good to go. Now, what I'm going to do with my decimal in the dividend is I call this something like a barbell. I'm going to bring it right straight up. And that's it. Once it's up, then I'm just going to do a normal division problem. So again, I used in and out to set it up. I made sure my divisor did not have a decimal. And then I drew this kind of barbell. A barbell is kind of like a weight to connect my decimal to my quotient or my answer. So now I can just divide. 4 cannot go into 2. 4 can go into 24 6 times. 6 times 4 is 24. And I bring down my 4. 4 can go into 4 once. 1 times 4 is 4, and I'm left with 0. So my answer is 6 1/10. Okay, so here is a problem I'd like you to try. It is 5 4/10 divided by 3. And your teacher will be asking you for the answer for that one. Okay, so now let's actually get started on our real lesson for today. And it says we're going to add fractions with unlike denominators using an area model. Okay, so our goal for today is, today I will add fractions using an area model. So that is actually pretty much the entire topic of this first unit we're going to be doing, of Unit 5, is adding fractions. So we're going to add fractions using an area model. Okay, let's look at our vocabulary together. And our first word says fraction, a numeric value that represents part of a whole or part of a group. And we have a numerator and a denominator, and we've been talking about that, and you've remembered that when I write that I kind of do a shortcut and just do a capital N and D circled, but we have a numerator and a denominator. And then they talk about these two things: reasonable, which is a logical or expected, an estimate, an approximation calculation. This is just asking yourself, does your answer make sense? And we're going to kind of talk about that, but we're going to really skip that as a step. And then they remind us about simplest form. Remember, that was our first lesson in this unit, was simplest form, and that we find our GCF. So we are going to be coming back to this and needing to remember that. Okay, our steps today look really long. Look at that. So we're going to kind of go through them and shorten them a little bit. Step 1 is estimate. We're not going to estimate. We're not going to really do that step too much. I'm going to cross that off. Okay, our next step says draw and shade each of the fractions separately, making sure one model is divided with horizontal lines and the other is divided with vertical lines. Okay, that is very important. So we're going to draw and shade one horizontal lines and one vertical lines. That's what we're going to do. We're going to draw and shade One has to have horizontal lines and one has to have vertical lines. That's going to be our first big step. Okay, step 2, which says 3, but our next step says add the same number of vertical lines as seen in the vertical line drawing to the model with horizontal lines. And then this one says now add the same number of horizontal lines as seen in the horizontal line drawing to the model with vertical lines. Wow, that's a lot of words and kind of confusing. Let's cross that off. And what we're going to say instead, and I'm going to just write it here, is we're going to match. We're going to make our models match. That's what we're going to just combine those steps and say make the models match. And I'll show you what that looks like. But once we've done them, we need to make them match or make them look the same. Okay, our next step says count the number of shaded pieces of both models. That sum will be your numerator. Count how many pieces either shape was divided into, and that will be your denominator. Okay, this is kind of finding our answer. Before we do this, we're also going to kind of move stuff around. So I'm going to write on here, we might try and create holes. And I'll explain what that looks like when I do mine, but I want you to write create holes. Okay, and then our last step just says simplest form. And remember, that's when we found that GCF in our first lesson. Okay, so we've kind of simplified our steps a little bit. Okay, I'm going to jump right in with my red pen. Now, you're going to notice that not only am I going to use a red pen today, but because my first step that I'm actually doing says draw and shade, I'm also going to be using a red crayon and a green crayon. So today you might want to as well have something to shade with. Could be a highlighter, could be something, but something to shade with might be helpful. Okay, so let's grab my first problem. Now you don't have this problem, so you're just going to sit back and watch. Okay, so it said, my first problem says 2 2/3 plus 1 3/4. Okay, so let's look at my step. Draw and shade. One has to have horizontal lines and one has to have vertical lines. Okay, so I'm going to draw my first one, 2 2/3, which means I have 2 holes. And then I have 2/3. So 2/3 means it was cut into 3 pieces and I only have 2 of the pieces. But I have the 2 holes. Okay, notice that when I cut this, I used vertical lines to cut it. Now in my directions it says I have to draw and shade, and one has to have horizontal lines and one has to have vertical lines. So when I draw my next one, I have 1 hole and I have 3/4. So I need to cut this one horizontally. Okay, so what do I have? I have 1 hole and I have 3 out of the 4 pieces. That's what that means. 4 means I cut it into 4 pieces and 3 means I have 3 of them. So that's what I did for step 1. I drew and shaded what I each had, and I made sure one was cut with vertical lines and one was cut with horizontal lines. Okay, now my next 2 steps I kind of crossed off and I said I'm just going to make them match. So I need to make these match. So this one is missing vertical or horizontal lines. So how many horizontal lines did I draw? 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3. And this one doesn't have vertical lines. So I drew 1, 2. So I'm going to draw 1, 2. Okay. So now they match. And if I count, I cut them both into 12ths, but they both match. That's what steps 3 and 4 originally said. We just made it easier by saying match. Okay, now step 5, I said we want to create holes. we want to like move stuff around. So think about if like after a party you had extra food. You've probably seen your mom like combine food into one pan, or if you have extra pizzas, you kind of move food from one box to the other. That's what I want to do. I'm going to go back and shade this a little bit because I'm noticing I didn't do a really good job shading it. But I want to move stuff around to try and create holes. So I already have these holes, but I have two partial kind of filled boxes. So because they're the same size slices or pieces, I can move them. So I'm going to take this one and move it over here. Pretend like I took it out of the box. I'm going to take this one out and move it over here. And I'm going to take this one out and move it over there. Now the reason I did that is because I wanted to create as many holes as possible. So whole entire ones. So what is my answer now? Well, what am I left with? I have 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. And then this one, I only have part of it. So what was it cut into? It was cut into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pieces. That's my denominator. And how many of the pieces do I have left? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I already took those out. So my answer is 4 5/12. Okay, let's see another one. This one is a word problem. Laura bought 4/5 of a pound of green grapes and 1/3 of a pound of red grapes. How many pounds of green and red grapes did she buy? Okay, so we know it's addition because I'm going to be adding the green grapes to the red grapes. So let's look back at our steps. Step 1, draw and shade. One has to have horizontal lines and one has to have vertical lines. So for 4/5, that means it was cut into 5 slices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I only have 4 of them. So that's what 4/5 looks like. Okay, 1/3 means it was cut into 3 pieces, but if these were vertical, I need to do these horizontal. So it was cut into 3 pieces, and I only have 1 of them. So you have to be very careful to always have horizontal lines on one and vertical on the other. Okay, now that I've drawn both of them, my next step says make them match. So this one is missing its horizontal line. So I had 1, 2. So 1, 2. And this is missing its vertical. So how many did I draw? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to now be trying to create some holes. So I'm going to move some around to try and create whole pans. So notice this one's almost full and this one's almost empty. So it'd make more sense to move some of these slices here. So let's move this slice over here. Let's move this slice over here. And let's move this slice over here. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's look at our answer. And our answer is going to be, I have 1 hole, and I have, this was cut into how many slices? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 slices, but I really only have 2 left. Okay, so the only step that I didn't do on both of those was step 6, which is simplify using our GCF. So let's go back now and let's see if we could simplify either of these and make them smaller. So remember when I simplified, I made a factor table for my numerator. So 1 times 5, 2 times nothing, 3 times nothing, 4 times nothing, and 5's a repeat. Okay, so is 5 a factor of 12? No. 1 is a factor of 12. But if I divide each of these by 1, is anything going to happen to them? No. Nothing's going to happen. They're going to stay the same. So this one is actually already in simplest form, which is why Ms. Munoz forgot to check that, because it's already in simplest form. Now this one, the same idea. If I made a factor table for 2, I get 1 times 2, and 2 is a repeat. So is 2 going to be a factor of 15? No, 2 doesn't fit into 15. So my GCF is 1, which means it's already in simplest form. Now that does not mean, ladies and gentlemen, that they're all going to be in simplest form. It just means I lucked out with mine. Okay, so let's try some together now. We are on page 30. And again, you might want to have something to shade in with, maybe a highlighter or something. I'm going to be using a crayon and a green marker. Okay, our first problem says 3.5 plus 2/5. Okay, so we first have to draw and shade. One has to be vertical and one has to be horizontal. Please make sure you do not go ahead of me because I want us to have matching ones. So I have 3 holes, and then I have a half, which means it was cut into 2 slices, but I only have 1 of them. Okay, so let me shade in my 3 holes. And I chose to divide this one, you can see, with a vertical line. Okay, now we're going to add to that 2/5. So I'm going to draw and shade 2/5. Now because this had a vertical line, this one has to have horizontal. So I have to cut it into 5 slices. Make sure you only have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have 2 of them. That's what 2/5 looks like. Okay, so now that I drew and shaded them, 1 vertical and 1 horizontal, now we're gonna make them match. So this one's missing my horizontal lines. How many did we draw? 1, 2, 3, 4 horizontal lines. 1, 2, 3, 4 horizontal lines. And this one's missing 1 vertical line. Okay, so now that we made the match, we're gonna move some around to try and create holes. So let's move these slices. We have 4 slices. Let's move them from there to here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is empty now. This one has nothing left in it. Okay, so what do we have? We have 3 holes. And here we have, how many slices was it cut into? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's my denominator. And my numerator is 9. Okay, so our answer is 3 9/10. And now we just need to see if we can simplify it. So let's make a factor table for 9. 1 times 9, 2 times nothing, 3 times 3, and I got a repeat, so I can stop. Okay, is 9 a factor of 10? No. Is 3 a factor of 10? No. 1 is, but 1 doesn't help us. So that means it's already in simplest form. Wow, we haven't had to simplify any yet. Okay, let's check our next one. And here we have a word problem. Salvador's Desserts made a batch of fresh chocolate chip cookies that required 2/5 of a pound of sugar and a batch of sugar cookies that required 3/4 of a pound of sugar. How much sugar was used all together? Okay, so this is kind of our key word that we're going to be adding. So we're gonna add 2/5 and 3/4. Okay, so again, I want you to not go ahead because I want ours to match. So 2/5 means we need to cut it into 5 slices. I'm gonna do it vertical. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slices, but I only have 2 of them. That's what 2/5 means. And then when I draw and shade my other one, I have to make sure I'm going to use the opposite line. So since I used vertical, I need to use horizontal. So the denominator's a 4, which means I need to cut it into 4 slices. And my numerator's a 3, which means I have 3 of the 4 slices. So that's our step 1. Okay, step 2 is we're going to make them match. So this one doesn't have any horizontal lines. So how many did we add? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's add 1, 2, 3. And this one doesn't have our vertical line. So how many did we draw? 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's draw 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we first drew and shaded one horizontal and one vertical. Now we made them match. Now we're going to try and make holes. So this one has more, so I think I would move these to here. So let's move that one here. Let's move that one over here. Let's move that one over here. This one over here, and this one over here. Okay, so what do we have left? We have one hole. And then over here, how many slices was it cut into? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. That's my new denominator. And then how many do I actually have? I only have 1, 2, 3 slices. So our answer is 1 3/20. Now let's stop to see if we can simplify that. So my factors for my numerator are 1 times 3, 2 doesn't work, and 3 is a repeat. So my only factors for 3 are 1 and 3. Is 3 a factor of 20? No. 1 is, but that doesn't help us. So, oh my goodness, every problem so far has already been in simplest form. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, remember your steps. You have page 31 to do, 32, and 33. Have a nice afternoon. Bye.